Welcome back to DIY guitar making, and welcome to my very, very cold shop right here. I'm warming up the shop right now. I got my wood stove going and the heaters and all that. And while that's happening, let's do a little Q&A. And once I get done the Q&A, just so you guys know, what I'll be working on today is more jig-related stuff for the Parlor guitars. That kind of stuff seems to just never end, and it's the kind of thing where as you get started on a new model of guitar, and I've noticed this time and time again, is you never really know what your issues you're going to run into that you're going to have to develop new solutions for. So for example, what I'm doing right now is I'm making new spreaders. I assumed that I would be able to use the spreaders that I use on all my exterior molds for my other models. But it turns out that this shape, this body shape, is so small that I actually can't fit those spreaders in there. They don't function correctly. So I'm now making whole new spreaders just for this model. You don't know what you don't know when you're starting an entirely new project like this. So I enjoy that though. I honestly enjoy the jig making. All right, with that said, let's go ahead and do those questions. Let's see what we got. Okay, this one is just a great comment that I really wanted to share. I just thought this was so cool, from Neil Stoddard. I did a video, a Q&A actually, where I was talking about making radius dishes. And here's Neil's comment. I came by an old satellite dish this summer. It's a 35-foot radius. That's a radius dish if I got my math correct. No crafting, boom, done. One less jig to make. P.S. If you find a dish, take a stick and a string, measure 35 feet, then see if your dish touches across its face. So that is just really cool. I mean, I never would have thought of that. But I can imagine how that actually works. So yeah, just wanted to share that. By the way, when he was talking about measuring it, he's talking about sticking the stick in the ground, having a length of string that is the radius that you intend to, or that you're searching for, and tying it to the stick, sticking the stick in the ground, stretching the string out, and then walking. You can essentially walk that radius or pull the string along that radius and see if it touches the face of whatever you rummage around in the trash to use. So I love that. Satellite dish, radius dish. Next question is from Mark Pell. Okay, this is a long one. Eric, what would be wrong or problematic about building an acoustic guitar with the body intersecting the neck at the 16th fret? I'm primarily an electric guitarist, so I like to reach into the upper register. For me, just having a couple more easily accessible frets would really increase the overall playability of an acoustic without all the extra woodworking and finishing difficulties of making it with a cutaway style body. On my Yamaha acoustic, which has a nominal 25-inch scale, that would mean about 1 13/64 of an inch more free neck length above the body to expose those 2 extra frets, without changing the basic size and structure of the internal neck anchorage block or upper bout bracing. The obvious external difference, besides a longer neck, not in itself being a big tech problem, would be that for a 25-inch scale, the bridge location moves 1 13/64 of an inch closer to the sound hole, incidentally still leaving about 1 7/8 of an inch or so of the top face exposed between a 4-inch sound hole and the new bridge location. Of course, the fretboard tongue would have to be 1 13/64 of an inch longer overall. Okay, this is a lot to read. And there's a lot of math and measurements there that aren't that helpful or interesting on a Q&A camera thing like this. So I'm going to go ahead and talk about adapting a guitar for different fret locations. Hold on one sec. Okay, so here's a guitar to look at, guitar number 85. So what he's talking about is moving the fret location. And so first, let me talk about generally, just in normal situations where you're doing a 14th fret or a 12th fret, which are the two primary fret locations. Almost all guitars are, the neck to body joint is at the 14th fret or at the 12th fret. Anything else is extremely uncommon. Not unheard of, but uncommon. So this is a 14 fret to the body guitar. If I wanted to design this to be a 12 fret to the body guitar, what you actually want to do, if it's done right, is you keep everything the same and you actually redesign the body shape itself so that the upper bout, the sweep of the upper bout, comes up and extends and meets at the 12th fret. What you don't want to do is simply push the neck down to the 12th fret and move the bridge, which is a common misunderstanding, because that would obviously be the easier thing to do, to just move the neck, you know, cut your joint at the 12th fret, push the neck down to there, and slide the bridge down by that distance of those two frets. However, the bridge wants to be in the center of the vibrational footprint of the top. You would be building a very non-optimal guitar if you move the bridge away from its central location. When I say the center of the vibrational footprint, what I'm talking about is everything below the transverse bar, which sits right here, okay? Just so you don't confuse that statement to mean the center of the entire top. It's actually the center from about right here down, all right? So that's why, rather than shifting the bridge location around, what we actually want to do is redesign the upper bout, because above that transverse bar, everything is essentially more or less acoustically inert. So we can either extend that or reduce it to accommodate different neck to body joint locations, okay? Now, with all that said, he wants to go to the 16th fret, which is a little extreme. That's not a common thing to do. You might run into some issues which might necessitate you essentially redesigning not only the shape, but the bracing pattern to some extent. And I'm sure you don't want to do that. You don't want to get that deep into the woods, into the weeds. So, yeah, the issues that I potentially see is that your neck block is going to be shifted down. You're going to reorient this so that this lines up with the 16th fret, the sweep of the upper bout, and that's going to move your neck block down here, which then it starts to conflict with where the transverse bar is. You can't just make the neck block smaller because you need a nice, stout mortise and tenon joint there, so you need to have enough space for that. So, some way that you can incorporate the neck block in with the transverse bar would be a good solution, essentially making the neck block and the transverse bar almost like one thing. That's a possibility, but either way, no matter what you do with this upper bout area, you have to keep the integrity of that joint. So you want to keep your block full size and not change that. Okay, that's all I'm going to go with on that. Let's do the next question. Let me put this guitar away. We have Keith Short. Always love hearing from Keith. This is another long question or comment here. I believe this is a comment, but I'm going to go ahead and read it because it's very good. Eric, first of all, many thanks for this summary of the steps. So he's talking about a recent video I did, which if you haven't seen it, it's a really great video, if I can say so myself. I'm very proud of it. It is a video that gives you a very easy, quick reference, step-by-step on acoustic guitar design, or at least the beginning steps of laying out your scale length and things like that. So check out that video for a little bit of background on what he's talking about, and also just because it's a really good video and a good reference. First of all, many thanks for this summary of the steps in laying out a guitar design. Also for your wise advice regarding initial rookie construction using an existing plan. So what he's talking about is, I mentioned in there as advice not to utilize this video on acoustic guitar design until you've at least built one guitar, if not 5, 6, 10 guitars. Just because you're going to dig yourself a very deep hole very quickly if you try to get a little too advanced like that. It's kind of like that previous question I just did. I'm not saying that he's digging himself a hole, or even that he's at that beginning early stage, but I'm saying that is an example of the kind of stuff that gets people into trouble, trying to do massive design changes on their first guitar. Never, 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 never a good idea. You don't know what you don't know. Okay? I've said that before. So Keith writes, I smiled because breaking that rule is pretty much what I did on my first build, a tenor ukulele. You have also recommended in previous videos using traditional materials from traditional lutherie sources for your initial builds. Yes, that's also a good thing to do. I went astray there also by using wood, oak, maple, and black walnut from local trees in my neighborhood. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart, as I enjoy listening to and playing my ukulele made with parts that originated in my neighborhood. I do agree that your advice is wise, as few DIY builders will be able to take the time to plan and execute a new design, and I was fortunate to have so many great hardwood trees so close at hand and the patience to allow the wood to stabilize prior to thicknessing and bending. As a retired engineer, I have been able to play the long game, taking time for wood to dry while I built the fixtures and jigs I needed. My first ukulele took about 2 years to finish, and there was a significant tweak when I redid the neck to headstock transition so it felt better in my hands. But it has been thoroughly enjoyable. I think my design sounds great. This year I finished 3 tenor ukuleles, each one a special from local wood. I look at them and think, Parker's Oak, Miss Cincinnati's Walnut, Jeff's Fallen Limb, Candy's Osage Orange, and that gives me great satisfaction. I had great mentors on YouTube that helped me choose tools for my basement shop and techniques for manufacture. Your channel is the best. Many thanks for sharing so generously. All right, thank you, Keith. I really want to use that question to clarify my position on that, actually, because when I give advice like that, I'm looking at a camera like I am right now. I'm not looking at a person, a human being, an individual. And I find that it's actually probably a majority of you guys who listen to this who are actually like Keith, in that you're building guitars specifically for the fun and the experience of it, and the fact that what you're creating is going to be a keepsake that is going to be meaningful to you. And all of those things are true of this other contingent of people that I'm going to talk about in a moment. All of those things are true of them as well, but they're especially true of someone like Keith, who's retired and building for the sheer joy of it, right? And that's a lot of you guys out there. So just to clarify, when I give that advice about using woods from very respectable sources where you know that the wood is going to be dried appropriately and that you're getting good quality samples, and also when I give the advice about not getting too deep into design in order to stick with the fundamentals and reduce your flaws early on in the game, I am imagining that I'm speaking to someone who is a young guy getting into lutherie, right? Possibly for a lifetime pursuit and for maybe even a career. And so that advice, I think, is very solid advice for someone who wants to have a strong foundation to not fall into those pitfalls. But again, most of you guys, and I fall into this category sometimes too, you know, doing this on YouTube. A lot of the guitars I build, not all of them, but a lot of them I build for fun for myself. And in those cases, I'll try something different. I'll use some wood that maybe I shouldn't use. And it's great. It's all part of the journey. And it truly is something that when the guitar is finished, I can look at that. And I love what Keith said there. I can look at that and think, oh, this was, you know, Jeff's, the fallen limb on Jeff's house, like he said, or Miss Cincinnati's oak. I forget the other names, Parker's walnut or something like that. Basically, he was naming his neighbors and where he got the wood from, and that's super cool. I had an oak tree fall in my backyard recently, and it's very tempting for me to dry that wood and use some of it, and I might. But, you know, it's a lot of work, so I might not. I'm lazy. But anyway, I totally understand that. If that's you, disregard that advice. Keep building from your heart and building things that you love to build, and take all the pitfalls and the little problems that come up as just interesting parts of the journey. Okay? Great comment as always, Keith. Let's do the next one. Okay, this question is from John Cook, and he writes, as always, thank you for your videos and answering our questions. My question is this: if you had to name one element of guitar building that affects the quality of tone, what would it be? I love this question. This is a good one. So for this question, I'm going to assume that we are building a guitar from for a specific body shape, okay? Just to simplify the question, because if I had to answer it in the most broad sense, I would say it is the relationship between your overall dimensions, which is the relationship between the size of the air chamber, the size of the sound hole, and the scale length, among other things. So that's just your general overall dimensions. But I think the spirit of the question is more like, within a given body size, what area should you focus on the most to improve the tone of your guitar? And to answer the question that way, I'm going to say it's your bracing. It's definitely your bracing. What I mean by bracing is the location and the pattern of your braces. The fit is always something that you can improve without changing anything about your bracing pattern. You can just get better at fitting those individual joints that connect to the X-brace if you're using an X-brace. Another aspect of the bracing, of course, is voicing. When you're trimming down the braces and flexing or tapping the top, however you choose to do that, in order to get it to an optimal sort of ballpark state of flexibility and responsiveness. That, in my opinion, is where all the magic is. You know where it's not, and this is where I get into trouble here, I get into hot water. It is not with material selection, as practically all of the major guitar manufacturing companies will lead you to believe. That's not to say that it doesn't matter what you use for your top or your back or your sides or your bracing. You know, if you're using ebony for your top, that's going to dramatically affect the function of the top and its responsiveness. But assuming that you're using the woods that are typically used by luthiers, you know, your Sitka spruce or your red cedar or redwood, softwoods, essentially. Assuming that you're using those, and good softwoods, not pine. Assuming that you're using those, it's what you do with the braces that really counts. Okay? So that's how I'm going to answer that question. Great question. And a great question for you guys. I'm not someone who is right about this. It's not about being right. This is definitely the kind of thing that needs to be debated. And people do debate this. So get on your keyboards and debate with me. Let me know, what do you find to be ripe ground for experimentation in order to improve the tone of an acoustic guitar? I'd like to know, and we'll talk about that more in future Q&As if you guys give me some comments about that. So next question is, I think we're moving on to the members forum now. Yep, yeah, we are. So this question comes from the members forum. Frank Chopin writes, I don't know if it's Chopin or Chopin. Let me know, Frank. Let's go with Chopin. Frank Chopin writes, I'm a little confused by why we glue the back down flat. Doesn't the radiusing of the braces later tend to open up the center joint? I don't know what you mean here, Frank. It might be a misunderstanding from the online course. The back is not glued down flat. The braces are radiused, which pulls the back into that radius. And then the rims are also radiused to that same radius, and then the back is glued to the rims. So at no point should you be gluing anything flat onto the back. Perhaps what you're talking about is why isn't the back glued to the rims against the radius dish? And it's simply because it doesn't have to be at that point, as long as if your surfaces, that is your braces and your rim set, if those surfaces have the correct radius on them, all you have to do is clamp them together, and it's going to then hold and glue in that orientation in a stable way. So you shouldn't have to worry about the center joint of the book matched pairs opening up. Let me know if I'm off base, if that's what you meant by your question, Frank. I might be misreading that. Let me know. The next part of his question is, or another question, also, isn't the cam just pushing straight down on the cam clamp's top jaw? What makes it pull in towards the center? So he's talking about, I described how cam clamps tend to pull towards the bar, the back edge of the clamp. Let me show you a clamp. Got them right here. A cam clamp, when you use them, it tends to pull in the direction of this metal bar here. And he's saying the cam pushes this straight down, but it doesn't actually. If you look at that, see this skinny portion here that gets pushed down by the cam? That moves at an angle as it comes down. See how that's angled? Okay? So that's why it pulls towards the bar. Also, there's another reason why it pulls towards the bar, is because the bar has a significant weight to it. So that weight causes it to pull. The heavier this bar is, the more it exacerbates that problem and causes the workpiece to pull towards the bar. So that's the one issue with cam clamps. I love cam clamps. It's my favorite clamp. But you always have to understand and deal with the fact that it wants to pull towards the bar. I actually made some cam clamps at one point out of aluminum, an aluminum bar instead of a steel bar, and they pull less because the aluminum bar has less weight. Okay? They still pull though, because you still have the problem, or as I wouldn't say problem, because as long as you understand that it's doing it, it's fine. But you still have the issue, let's say, that the bottom part of the cam here moves at an angle towards the bar, right? So you just have to deal with it. Okay, next question. And this is from Gary Rosquist, again, the members forum. Gary writes, Eric and all, I am planning on making some Parlor guitars for my grandchildren. My question is, did you use existing plans for yours, or are you developing your own? What scale length are you using for your Parlors? Any suggestions or hints or tips on making a Parlor? Okay, so what I did, and what I always do, is I buy several plans. This is sort of the research stage. I bought a couple plans, I think yeah, actually I'll show you over here. You can kind of see, you know, the inside scoop on what's going on. I had bought a bunch of plans here, and some of these aren't even Parlor guitar plans. These are other plans they already had for an OM. But this one's a Parlor guitar plan, yep. And get at least 1, 2, maybe 3 different sets of plans and look at them, and you can see what are the similarities and what are the differences between the plans, and that gives you a good broad scope idea of what is appropriate, right? They're all going to be a little bit different, and what you end up doing might be a little bit different. And you can at least see a range of appropriate takes on a Parlor guitar. I'll put it that way. That's why I buy a couple different plans and just spend an afternoon looking at them and coming up with ideas, jotting down ideas, tracing different designs off of those designs, laying tracing paper over the plan and drawing something based off of it. Maybe borrowing certain aspects of a plan wholesale, just taking, say, for example, the body shape, but then redesigning the bracing pattern if necessary. By the way, all this that I'm saying, again, I already said this earlier in this Q&A, this is advanced. So if you're new to guitar making, you don't have to do this, and you probably shouldn't. You should just use the set of plans that you buy. But this is what I do. That's what he asked, so I'm explaining what I do. So yeah, I found a couple different plans. Probably the closest to what I ended up with, probably the closest, most similar set that I used to create my own was this one, but I did have to adapt it pretty significantly because I was doing a 13 fret to the body instead of a 12 fret to the body. I am still doing a 24.5 inch scale length. Technically mine is a 24.56, I think. Yeah, 24.563. And that's just because I knew I could find a template for that, because that's an old Gibson scale length. And the difference between 24.5 and 24.563 is like a hair follicle. So it's very appropriate to just seek out an existing template that you can purchase that is close enough. Okay? Just wanted to point that out. You don't have to always reinvent the wheel. So yeah, had to adapt it for 13 frets to the body, which means I had to adjust the splay of the X-brace just a little bit, and the position of the center of the X-brace I had to shift to account for that, and I had to shift the location of the bridge, and like we talked about earlier in this, I had to adjust the upper bout just a little bit. Let me turn off my phone for a second. Sorry, I got derailed there by a spam call, and I should know better. Anyway, I think I answered that question. This is a good set of plans if you want to just buy a set of plans to use. This is a great scale length, I think, for a Parlor guitar. You can, from Stu Mac, buy a 24.563, whatever I said a moment ago. You can buy that template. It's a Gibson scale length. You can buy that and use that. And yeah, that's a great way to do it. But I adapted mine for using a couple different plans because there were certain changes that I needed to make in order to make it my own. All right, let's do another question. The last question, again from the members forum. This is Graham Argus, and he is having some moisture, humidity control kind of issues, which I think are more related to sourcing, as far as sourcing the wood. So let's go ahead and read his question. Hi all, I have an issue with my new builds. I'm making my second and third guitar together. Both are at the same stage, sides in the molds, kerfed, end blocked, and wedged. And a couple of weeks ago, I braced the backs with 20-foot radii. They are both now glued to the sides and have been sitting in the mold since. They were sitting in my shed, and now I notice both backs radii have flattened out and slightly bowed inward in the lower body. Is this fixable by laying it in the radius dish under weight or something? So I actually had a little back and forth in there in the members forum, and a couple other people chimed in. And then I asked Graham in the members forum if he had any climate controls in his shed, and he wrote, "My shed has no climate control, unfortunately. The wood came from Tasmania, Australia. I live in Victoria, Australia, the next closest state. My last guitar was made from the same wood, even the same tree batch, Blackheart sassafras." I said that weird. Sassafras. Blackheart sassafras. On all of these, I've used King Billy pine for the back bracing, which I'm thinking may be the issue, though it was fine on my last. But wondering, has the bracing bowed after shaping them thinner once glued to the back? It was the start of autumn here when I braced them and attached to the sides, and still quite cool weather, about 40% humidity. It's been quite wet here right up until even now. We are only just getting clear days and mid-20 degrees with about 50 to 60% humidity. For the last 3 weeks, I've had them inside my house, but no real change. I fear I'll need to try and remove the backs and braces and re-brace with something else. I love that you said that at the end there. That, I think, is your solution. I wouldn't try to put weights on this and fix it in that way, although there's ways to do that as well, but it's really not that difficult to remove the old braces and just re-brace them up. That is the best solution right there. So you're going to really struggle with trying to work with those braces, and anything you do to get that bow out of there, you're still leaving a lot of unnatural tension in the instrument. It wants to flatten out in the way that it has. So re-bracing is the answer. And this is tough because there's a lot of chaos here. There's a lot of factors to consider. That King Billy pine, I don't know what King Billy pine is. I have never used it. I don't have any experience with it, but I would definitely suspect that the brace wood is in some way what is causing the problem here. It's not likely to be the Blackheart sassafras. It's your braces. Are they quarter sawn, as somebody else asked in this forum? That's a good question too. They should be reasonably quarter sawn. If they're somewhat rift sawn, as a lot of wood is nowadays, that's okay too. But if they're flat sawn, that's going to be a problem. So look for well quartered material. And maybe you talked about shaping them thinner. Maybe you I've done this before, overshape them to the point where they're not really having a significant enough influence on the shape of the back anymore, simply because the braces have become too minimal, right? We all want minimal bracing, but we can take that too far. And then other than that, the elephant in the room, let's say, is that shed, right? Climate control is a real problem for guitars because everything is so thin. Plates are thin, the bracing is small, so everything is subject to warping and to changes in moisture and humidity in a more extreme way than if you're building a chair or a table or some other project out of wood. So I would really like to see you get some sort of climate control in that shed if you're continuing to experience these problems, because I think that's where it's coming from. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is sourcing. Where are you getting, you said, you gave me geographically where you're getting the wood from, but I'm more interested in who you're getting the wood from. Is this a large company that has a good reputation with drying its material? Or is this just a friend of yours, someone you know, or a small company that, you know, maybe a little less reliable or less is known about them, okay? Now, I hate to like sort of crap on small companies here, small businesses. I'm a small business, but unfortunately, I have personally found I have gravitated towards some of the larger suppliers simply because they tend to be more reliable, because if they're having issues with their wood, they are dealing with in such mass that it becomes a serious problem for their business and their business's reputation. So they tend to be a little more on top of it, I find, than some of those small suppliers. Again, hate to say it, I'm a small business owner myself, but it's just something I've noticed and dealt with. So if you are having issues with the wood that you're sourcing from certain companies, a good fallback is you could at least try getting that wood from Luthier's Mercantile or Stu Mack or Hearn Hardwoods, a bigger company. And if you then no longer have those issues, well, there you go. You probably figured out the problem right there. So I just want to throw that in there as well. So I would check out the climate controls on the shed, check out the source of the wood itself, look into King Billy Pine again. I don't know anything about it, but maybe it's just not a great wood for bracing. That's always possible, especially with pines. That I would just check that out. And I feel like there was something else we talked about. Oh, yeah, I like your solution. Re-brace it, okay? Don't try and fix it. Just start over again with that part of the build, okay? All right, that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. I'm going to go work on these Parlor guitars, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.
If you learned something here, please give this video a like and subscribe so you can be notified when I release a new DIY guitar making video. And if you want to really learn more, take one of my structured online courses at ericschaferguitars.com or register for a hands-on guitar building workshop here with me in Burnville, Pennsylvania.